Hey guys, welcome back. It's Michael here. Today I'm just going to have a quick little talk about Canon, why I believe they're so successful, and what I like about the Canon cameras. So generally, Canon if you look at Canon cameras and you're looking at specifications, you go on a DxO Mark or I don't know, some other review sites, and they're sort of honing in and pixel peaking and looking at dynamic range and things like that. And the Canon cameras, they're coming out pretty ordinary. It's showing that they're not so good. Perhaps you shouldn't consider these, because for the same price you can get a camera with, you know, much better dynamic range and better low light performance, etc, etc. Okay, it's the general theme with Canon cameras if you start looking into the specifications. And it's something that really annoys me, is that people are probably looking at these reviews and they're going, oh, forget about Canon, I'll go and get a whatever, a Sony or a Nikon. Now particularly Nikon has ruled the roost when it comes to specifications and looking good in reviews, okay, because basically the Nikon cameras, they perform really well, like when it comes to testing, okay. So, you know, the dynamic range is great, you're able to pull out the shadows, you know, unbelievably well. I mean, despite mostly using Sony sensors, they seem to perform even better than Sony cameras somehow. So Nikon's really been nailing this for a long time, and now Sony's stepped up to the mark with their cameras, and Sony cameras are now pretty good at it. So it's really interesting that poor Canon has sort of, you know, taken a step back in the from the light, you know, and the light's got onto these other manufacturers. But despite that, I don't know, if you look around, you still see a whole heap, and I'm pretty sure that Canon is pretty much the photography market leader still. Well, I mean, I haven't looked it up or anything, but I'm pretty sure they are. They have been for a long time. I don't think they've lost it at the moment, although Sony's probably creeping up really rapidly, and I think Nikon's, you know, dropping down pretty rapidly too. Now, why is Sony picking up? Sony is a real innovator. They package a hell of a lot into their cameras, there's no doubt about it. They got a great system, you know, the cameras, every new model that comes out has got more and more features, like the A7 III, you know, it really is, if you're looking on paper, it's an outstanding camera, there's no doubt about it. I'm sure I'd be happy to have one. I don't have one, I've never used one. Only in the shop I've used one, but and even in the shop I could see how fast it was. It's a real great camera, you know, it really is fantastic. But, you know, and there's a big but, I've used Sony cameras in the past, and I like Sony, so I'm not dissing on Sony at all, but for me, there is definitely more work involved in using a Sony camera. Now that's simply because I need to make more adjustments and tweaks post to get the camera, the photograph to look good. So with my Canon photos, when I load them up and I'm looking in RAW, generally I only have to make some minor changes, unless I've made a mistake with exposure, then I might have to do more drastic sort of manipulating. But generally in Lightroom I can manipulate the Canon images pretty rapidly and fast with minimal sort of manipulation to get them looking really nice and very pleasing sort of images. Now that comes down to, you know, the tone and I think it's like the mood of the image, you know, the general feeling you get from the colors and the contrasts and just the way the sensor is, you know, reading the scene that you're photographing. And I believe Canon does something really special there. They've really nailed the whole color science thing, and this is despite I've seen some other YouTubers, you know, talking about this and saying no, when you get to RAW that they're all the same, and you know, there's nothing in it. But for me, I don't believe that's quite the case. For me, I really believe, and it's with my own experience, you know, I'm definitely doing more work with other camera systems, and there's no doubt about it. And the colors, they just look great out of Canon. I don't know what it is, whether it is that crappy sensor. Maybe I need a little bit of crappiness to make my picture look good. Who knows? But yeah, I'm enjoying it so much. And you know, I got on Facebook. Why I'm making this video is because, you know, I come home today and I got onto Facebook on the computer here, and I'm just looking at somebody who I subscribe to. I don't know particularly why I subscribe to them. They're a photographer in Indonesia, and they've taken this photo of this girl. She's sitting on, I don't even know what it is. It's like a stool thing in the middle of an old, looks like an old shopping mall. It's, you know, got leading lines in it. She's nice and centered within the leading lines, and she's a pretty girl. She's striking a nice pose, and it's all happening, and just the whole color and ambience of the photo is really pleasing and beautiful. It's a good photo. Okay, there's no doubt about it. Then I go up and I look at what sort of camera took it. Now, surprise, surprise, it's a Canon. Okay, just bear with me. It's a Canon 1300D with a 50mm lens. Now, being a 1300D, you'd have to assume that the guy's got probably a 50mm 1.8, you know, a cheap kit zoom, kit lens. And you wouldn't believe it, but the camera that he's used is a Canon 1300D with a 50mm lens. Now, I'm assuming that this is a 50mm 1.8 just because it's such a cheap camera. So this is like bottom of the range Canon, you know, really plasticky, crappy feeling cameras. You know, we've seen these cameras, and you know, we might have started with these cameras and we might have progressed to better, bigger and better things. This is a very cheap camera, you know, build quality, everything about it's cheap. But inside that cheap camera is the Canon magic that makes photos like this. You know, there's no doubt about it. You know, I'm not going to deny it. And the photo looks beautiful, you know. For me, that could have been from any camera. That could have been from you know, a 1D series camera. It could have been from a 5D Mark IV. It could have been from, you know, the most expensive Canon camera. It could have been, and yet it's from the cheapest Canon camera with probably, I don't know for sure, but probably the cheapest Canon lens. So there you go, just my little rant. And you know, it really is, you know, if you want to get an image these days, you can get a really great image despite having a cheap camera and a cheap lens. If you got the right cheap lens, like the 50mm 1.8, it's filming me right now. It's cheap lens. It's like, you know, what, $150 or something. Ridiculous, you know, ridiculously cheap. And, you know, even on a cheap camera, we're getting beautiful, beautiful results from Canon. And, you know, I can talk about this because I have used so many systems in the past. You know, I've used Sony, I've used Nikon, I've used Olympus, I've used Panasonic. All of them, they're all good. You know, they've all got strengths and weaknesses naturally, like anything. But at the end of the day, the Canon, it's got the color quality. Fuji's sort of close, it's close in there, but Canon, it just nails it. It's just so much easier with Canon, and I really enjoy it. I love my Fuji cameras, and you know, they're so close, like I'm saying. You know, probably if I had to rank all the camera brands that I would rather use myself, being a person who takes lots of photos of people, mind you, okay, I would probably say Canon number one, then Fujifilm close second. You know, either one I'm happy to use. I'm not fussed. I used to use a lot of Nikon in the past, and I've just found that despite, you know, the fantastic performance of the Nikon sensor on paper and, you know, in testing, real world usage doesn't sort of get me going like that. You know, I'm not into the Nikon color as much. The Nikon color is good. Again, it's very good, but it needs a little bit more manipulating to get it up to these sort of levels, which is a shame. So that's just my little rant. Of course, this is just my opinion, okay? Of course, you may like the colors of the Nikon system, you may like the colors of the Olympus system, I don't know, and it doesn't matter. You know, whatever works for you works for you. What's working for me is working for me. This is my opinion. But I'm saying this because when I look around and I look at a lot of pros, they're using Nikon, okay? I know now that a lot of them are drifting over into Sony particularly, and some are Canon, Nikon, but generally there is a real strong following of Canon, and there always has been, and I believe there always will be, despite the poor, you know, performance, you know, in testing. It's really just amazing how good the images will be when you use Canon. So anyway, that's just a little rant today, Friday afternoon rant, and hope you have a great weekend, and I'll catch you later. Bye.